Imagine being able to detangle, dry, and style with one tool. Just in time for back to school, the Infinity Pro by Conair with the Knot Doctor all-in-one dryer brushes do it all for frizz-free salon results at home. The pink smoothing brush has 136 Flexolite bristles for painless detangling and 1,000 watts of high-performance power for smooth, shiny results. And the purple large oval dryer brush creates glam waves and comes with a bonus volumizing attachment for added lift and volume at the roots. The all-in-one dryer brushes are perfect for all hair types, with 3 heat settings for customized styling and frizz-fighting technology that leaves hair shiny and manageable. These styling essentials are your prescription for salon results at home. Go to Conair.com to get your Infinity Pro by Conair with the Knot Doctor all-in-one dryer brush or all-in-one smoothing dryer brush now.
Hi, this is Jason Solomons. I write every week in The New European on the best in film from Europe, Hollywood and beyond. If you'd like to enjoy more from The New European, do join us by subscribing at theneweuropean.co.uk/subscribe.
Hello, snowflakes, and welcome back to the New European podcast. It's a British eye on European politics and culture from the people who bring you the New European newspaper. People like me, Steve Anglesey. How are you? In a moment, I'm going to be joined by the author and journalist Sarfraz Manzoor, whose new book, They, What Muslims and Non-Muslims Get Wrong About One Another, is out now. He's written about it in the current issue of the New European. And then, as is our custom, we'll be putting more putrid politicians and pompous pundits into the Hall of Shame. The New European has got an excellent new website. Why not check it out at theneweuropean.co.uk, and you can enjoy more from the New European by subscribing at theneweuropean.co.uk/subscribe. And we have an excellent new podcast you can listen to after this one too. Charlie Connolly's Great European Lives is great. It tells the life stories of amazing Europeans in short 10-minute bursts. It's available wherever you get your podcasts. So coming up, Sarfraz Manzoor. But first, it'll probably have caught your eye that the pub chain Wetherspoons, run by the Brexiteer Tim Martin, is running out of some beers as a result of the HGV supply line crisis that's been partly caused by Brexit. It's strange because I don't remember we'll be able to sell you less beer, being one of the promises on those beer mats listing the benefits of Brexit that Tim had printed up around the time of the referendum. And with Tim's ban on EU beers, how has a nice pint of ice-cold Schadenfreude crept onto the menu? Look, there are more serious things to worry about than shortages of Carling, Coors and Bud Light at Wetherspoons. This week, my mum, who's been suffering from unexpectedly high blood pressure, was told she couldn't have a blood test because her GP was running out of blood tubes. The scramble for drivers in this HGV crisis is seeing recruitment bonuses and higher wages, up to 40% higher. It's great for the drivers, isn't it? But inevitably, those bonuses and pay rises will be paid for by price rises, which are going to disproportionately affect the poorest people in our society. Our food and drink producers are on their knees. Trade to the EU in the first 6 months of 2021 is down 27% on the same period in 2019. That's a loss of £2 billion. And as I've said here before and written about in the New European, the customs changes on October the 1st and January the 1st are going to bring new levels of chaos. Now, I know a lot of you will disagree with this, but I don't think what's happening to Wetherspoons is funny. I think it's sad. I think it could have been avoided. I think it still could be ameliorated. But that would require a bit of honesty. It would require people like Tim Martin and Boris Johnson to stand up and say, some of what I thought was right was wrong, and here's how we're going to fix it. And Tim Martin is already some way down that line. He's calling for ways to make it easier for EU workers to migrate here, to work in his pubs. And he's calling for ways to make it easier for EU drivers to come back here and deliver his beer. All he needs to do is work out what the EU gets in return. It's not a one-way street. And we had an agreement that did all that. But until they do stand up and say, some of what I thought was right was wrong, and here's how we're going to fix it, until the idea that they need us more than we need them is buried once and for all, then the taps are going to run dry. The chickens will be staying home to roost rather than going off to Nando's. The milkshakes are going to remain unthrown at Nigel Farage. It just needs some Brexiteers to have the balls to own up. We asked listeners of this podcast what they thought of the Wetherspoons crisis. Lifelong landlady said, "If it was just spoons, I'd be laughing at Tim, but it's many pubs. The tenanted pubs are suffering far more." Daniel Reed said, "I would love to be a fly on the wall of the next Wetherspoon shareholders meeting." Liz Anderson said, "Tim Martin was warned and he didn't listen. It's staggering when someone runs a business that is based on free movement of people and goods and yet doesn't even understand his own business model." Josh Steinman says, "Wetherspoons buy tail end or overproduction beer at cut prices. Brewers are going to be managing their production tighter, so with fewer drivers, brewers will be prioritising their full fare paying customers." Andrew Hall says, "I use the Neverspoons app instead and I support other pubs nearby." And Fluff, I think he sums it up quite well. He says, "Tim Martin deserves what's coming, but it's a shame for his underpaid staff." Now, the author and journalist Sarfraz Manzoor. His many credits include The Guardian, The Times and The Sunday Times, and now I'm delighted to say The New European. His first book, Greetings from Berry Park, was filmed as Blinded by the Light. It described a childhood growing up Pakistani and Muslim in 1980s Luton while completely obsessed with Bruce Springsteen. But what Muslims and non-Muslims get wrong about each other, is a different kind of journey through a post-Brexit Britain where there is fear and suspicion, but also a bit of hope. Welcome to the podcast. It's a terrific piece, and from what I've gone through so far, terrific book. There's a great piece of journalism, some superb, really revealing interviews in there. Paul Mason was here last week, and he was talking about the moments of concern and despair that led him to write his new book, which is How to Stop Fascism. Were there similar moments of concern and despair that led directly to you writing They?
Yeah, they were sort of, to be honest, I can sort of bring it back down to 2016, where you might remember something happened right about June.
Yeah, I've been trying to block it out, but a podcast about it.
I know, you got a newspaper about it. But and to be honest, it was a combination of things. But 2016, you had Manchester Arena, then you had London Bridge, you had Westminster Bridge. So you had all these attacks going on in the name of Islam. You then had Joe Cox's murder. You then had, obviously, Brexit. Later that year, Donald Trump gets elected. You then also had the simmering stuff going on about Rotherham and Rochdale and Telford and Oxford and all these child grooming stories. And then the following year, you've got this guy, Darren Osborne, who tries to drive a van into a mosque in Finsbury Park near where I live. And then all of that, you then also got the Tommy Robinson Brigade sort of, joining in and sort of causing trouble. And I have to be honest, I got really down about all of this stuff because it made me feel like this wasn't the country that I thought it was. And I've always generally believed that most people are tolerant, most people are decent, Twitter isn't the real world. But when you start seeing so many demonstrations of things that suggest tensions between Muslims and non-Muslims. And then I remember seeing this Channel 4 News report, which I mentioned in the piece for the New European. And it was this guy, and he basically says, look, this vote, Brexit vote, it's not about immigration. It's not about trade or Europe. It's about immigration. It's about Muslims coming into this country. Simple as that. And I thought maybe this guy maybe we should be applauding him because maybe he's actually telling us the truth rather than what everybody else is claiming it's about. So I did get really down. And then I just started thinking, well, what can I do? Based on what I've got to offer the world, what can I do? I'm not a politician. I'm not, I don't have a column. I don't have, I don't run any kind of institution. All I've got is the ability to try and tell some stories, a bit of journalistic, abilities. So I thought I would try and do my bit to try and make things better. And that's partly why I wrote this book, to try and understand the sources of the division, but then also to see whether there might be a road to a better place.
And I think it is a much needed thing, and it hopefully, it's breaking a silence that's led to all these years of fear and suspicion. Is it a book that is to be read by Muslims and non-Muslims, as it says in the subtitle? Who's the ideal reader of this book, do you think, and what do you want them to leave it with?
Well, to be honest, when I was starting to think about it, I was thinking, imagine I was sitting opposite someone who was, a little bit Islamophobic, basically somebody who, they don't have to be a stone cold bigot, but they had basically read the stuff in the right-wing press. They had they had followed certain people on Twitter and they'd got themselves into this narrative that Islam was a religion which was essentially backward, which was essentially misogynistic, that was essentially violent in in what it preached, that it had issues about homosexuality, that it had issues about anti-Semitism. I wanted to basically ask this person, what are your concerns about the religion? And I literally did a brainstorm of all these things that I've just listed. And then I just thought, okay, well, why don't I just interrogate this, not in a total defense of Islam, as in none of this is true, but using my journalistic ideas and saying, let's see, why do people think this? How true is it? And if it is true, who are the people who are making it a better place and a more progressive place? But the thing was, I kind of didn't want to do something which was just going to be a brainless defense of everything, as if everything is all hunky-dory and all of this is just the media tittle-tattle, So my thought was, and when you answer your question, my thought was, no matter who you are, whatever paper you read, whoever you voted for, there will be things in this which will make you feel a little bit uncomfortable. There'll be some things that will confirm what you think, and there'll be certain things that will make you uncomfortable, So actually, the idea is that whoever reads it, they'll find something that will surprise them, that will hopefully inform them, but will also provoke them into thinking a little bit harder than about what they thought they knew.
And the chat. I mean, I knew I was going to enjoy this when I opened up the contents page and saw exactly as you've described how you've organised this. And the chapter headings are, I guess, beliefs about what some British non-Muslims think about British Muslims. I hope you can talk about a couple of those and get your take on what you found and what you think. One of the chapter headings is, they don't want to live among us. And you make a really interesting point about, what we perceive as segregated communities in Blackburn and Luton, Bradford. And some of those have been segregated, by the way, because white people moved out, didn't they, as Muslims?
Absolutely, yeah.
Moved in. And then you bring up your own community in North London. What's all that about? What's your thinking there?
Well, what it is that what happens, I find, is that when you start living a certain life, you start justifying that life and thinking that basically that's the only way to be. And you can start thinking that somehow, you can always make yourself the hero of your own story, and that's true about your own political views or whatever, And I thought, well, I want to try and, when I'm writing this book, I want to be as hard on myself and my own preconceptions and my own prejudices as I'm going to try and be on everybody else's. So I grew up in a fairly, in quotes, segregated community in Luton, very Pakistani, hardly anybody white ever came through our doors. My parents told us that white people were like a different kind of sort of people and we shouldn't really be mixing with them. So it was all sort of, as you might kind of, pretty much textbook segregation. I now live in North London, and the usual story would be to say, well, I've left segregation for a rich, multicultural, diverse, truly integrated life. But then you sort of drill down and you think, well, how integrated is it? Like, do I literally know anybody who voted to leave? Not really. Do I know anybody who isn't double jabbed? Double jabbed? I know a couple of people, and I'm starting to try and withdraw my social interaction with them. Do I know anybody who doesn't listen to Radio 4 and Six Music? Not that really. They all basically own the same Cook's books by Otto Lengi and Anna Jones. We all discuss The White Lotus and the same Netflix shows. And it's almost like, it's actually a bubble of self-perpetuating ideas. And anybody, as I say in the piece, I've never heard anybody, when we've had some friends round for dinner back in the days when we could have friends round for dinner so easily, I've never heard anyone say, it'd be really nice to have a proper Tory around this table just for the sake of diversity. It's like, and so in a way, let's be hard on oneself. Actually, that is also segregation. That's also a self-reinforced bubble. But this is one which is on the whole white, well-educated, well-to-do. And it isn't one that really anyone points the finger at in the way that they might do about other segregated bubbles.
Let me just quickly go through some of the other ones. I mean, these are hard things to believe and hard things to say, but they follow a violent religion. They follow a religion that hates Jews. They believe homosexuality is a sin.
I'm not pulling any punches here, am I?
No, of course not.
Well, I just thought that my point, I suppose, was I don't want anyone to say, oh, you know what, he's written something and he hasn't tackled the elephant in the room. So some of those chapters are really hard to write. The one about child sexual exploitation was an incredibly difficult one to write, but my point was, I want this book, it's not going to be definitive, but I want this book to not be, nobody could accuse this book of not tackling the hard questions to do with multiculturalism and British Muslims, because it tackles every single one of them. And, at the end of it, whether I think you'll hopefully feel with each one of those things that the things that we're told about the religion aren't quite the full story.
And there's a tremendous amount of hope in the book as well, which we'll come to in a minute, and in your piece for the New European, which is equally wonderful. There's a quote from Sajid Javid on the back of your book, and it's a great quote. Hope is ever present in what is simply a must read. And then, of course, you mention in the book and in the piece that, when you were growing up in Luton, it was probably unthinkable that you would have people like Sajid Javid in a position of power, Sadiq Khan, and you mentioned people like Michel Hussein and Riz Ahmed, achieving the kind of status that it didn't seem possible for Muslims when you were a child. But you also talk about Boris Johnson and his awful letterbox column. What were people that you spoke to, Muslims that you spoke to in the writing of this book, what do they think of this government? And is Javid diminished in some way by being part of it, do you think?
Well, I'll be honest, I didn't ask people what they thought of the government because I wanted to write a book which wasn't as sort of linked to the present moment in that way. So it wasn't kind of like trying to do that. There's two things I was going to say. One is that I think that, when one focuses on the things that are not right about a country or a society, which is right to do, you can sometimes blind yourself to the things that are right or the things that are working. And so, as I say in the piece, the idea that we would have as many people in positions of power and in visibility who are from a British Muslim background, as we do, and also British Asian has broadened it out, would have been absolutely unthinkable. And yet what I find interesting is that hardly anybody really mentions it. And if they do, they don't sort of say necessarily in a particularly, nobody seems to be saying about the Chancellor that he hasn't got a chance of replacing Boris Johnson because he's British Asian. That doesn't seem to be a question. That doesn't seem to be a black mark against him, and I find that really, really hopeful. But the fact that we don't even discuss it is kind of interesting. Now, with Sajid Javid, it's really interesting because virtually nobody who is British Muslim seems to give him any respect or credibility whatsoever amongst the people I talk to. They mostly think he's a coconut, as in brown on the outside and white on the inside. A lot of people say, he sort of uses his ethnicity and his identity when it serves him, but on the whole, he's completely burnt his bridges, etc. Personally, I have to say, I talked to him for the book, but I think that's unfair. And I think that tells us about how certain people, if they follow certain views, are deemed acceptably Muslim and others aren't. I happen to not agree with, I think anybody who had a picture of Margaret Thatcher as a 16-year-old, as he did, is obviously not somebody who I can think of as a truly heroic figure. But at the same time, it's a heck of a journey to have gone from what he has done, from where he started to where he's got to. And the fact that so many people basically kind of discount the fact that he's Muslim because he's a conservative, I personally think that is a little bit problematic, So I think he doesn't get the respect he deserves. And I think the fact that I quoted him on the back won't necessarily win me too many new Muslim readers. But I thought it was interesting that both Sajid Javid and Alan Johnson, who are both former Home Secretaries and probably don't agree on too much, are both quoted at the back of the book.
Yes, there you go. I'm not sure Alan Johnson had a picture of Margaret Thatcher, or if he did, I'm not sure. He probably had.
I think he had a picture of the Beatles, probably.
Probably, very, very, very probably. Let's end by talking about hope, because the piece and your book is so full of it, and it's full of these inspiring stories. I was reading about Hannah and Shazia last night. It's absolutely brilliant. And you say it was fascinating just how often in my book change is the result of individual actions. Can you talk a bit more about that and the people that you met that are doing that and what we need to do to start moving towards each other across this big divide?
Yeah, because I wanted the book to feel hopeful, because I think that too easily we can write a book which basically says we're all going to hell in a handbasket and there's nothing we can do about it. And I wanted it to feel a little bit more instructive and a little bit more inspiring. And so I did seek out the stories of hope that would hopefully counter the more grim things. And what was interesting about most of those stories was that there was often in the stories of these people a decision. They came to a crossroads, and they took a particular decision, and then that decision changed their life or changed the life of somebody else. And then that also changes the narrative more broadly. So, for example, there's a story about a synagogue in Bradford, and the synagogue is in a very Asian area, and the roof is damaged, and it looks like the synagogue, which is one of the oldest buildings in Bradford, is under threat. And the guy who runs the synagogue is in his late 80s. He visits the local Muslim community and approaches one of the people in the community and says, tells them about the problem. And this Muslim guy says, "How much does it cost to fix?" And the guy tells him, and he's like, "Maybe I can help." And he consults his imam at the mosque to say, "Is it okay to help this guy who works at the synagogue to help to build the synagogue?" And the imam says, "Absolutely. Islam and Judaism have a huge shared history, and they have a huge amount of respect for each other." He gets the thumbs up. So this Muslim man ends up funding the saving and the rebuilding of the synagogue. Terrific. And that then helps foster really good, close relationships between Muslims and Jews in Bradford. Now, that was a crossroads moment. That man made a decision to go for hope. Similarly, there'll be a story about a Muslim woman actually up in Yorkshire whose son is gay, and she basically could have at some point sort of told him that he was ostracized from the family, but she makes a decision that she's going to embrace and accept him. And so when I met them together. So this Muslim man, a very traditional Muslim woman, I did the entire interview in Urdu, and she made a decision that she was not going to let the fact that is not what she necessarily would have wanted from her son get in the way. And when I said to her, what do you think about people who say that this religion is not is homophobic or something? She said, "Tell me who these people are and why they think they are bigger than Allah. The only person who can judge me is Allah, not anyone else in this community." And so she made a decision that she was going to love and defend her son. And then I finally think about my own mum, who, when I got together with somebody who was white and not a Muslim, she told me that this woman could go to Hajj in Mecca 7 years in a row and she would never be accepted into our family. And yet when it came to the wedding day, my mum did turn up to my wedding. So each of these people made a decision, and that decision helped reach to a better place. And so what I ended up concluding was that politics and policies are important, but if we really want to journey towards a more hopeful and united society, it's also on each of us and what decisions we make as people, because hope lives and dies in the hands of individuals and the choices that we all make.
Brilliant. I would vote for that as a stump speech. That was a terrific way to end. I must just ask you before you go, how's the state of your Springsteen love at the moment? Undiminished? Well,
I'll tell you what, I was actually this is the last week that Springsteen is playing at Broadway.
Yes.
And I was actually thinking of flying out to New York to catch the final show. And if it wasn't for the fact that it's actually illegal, as far as I can tell, to fly to New York because of, I don't think you're allowed to fly in if you're from Britain into New York, I would actually be in New York this week. So that's where my state of my love is.
Well, there you go. And you can, that's a terrific book in itself. But what Muslims and non-Muslims get wrong about each other is equally terrific. Thank you so much for joining us, Sarfraz Manzoor. It's been a real treat to read his piece. Please join the New European by subscribing at theneweuropean.co.uk/subscribe. And finally, it's the Hall of Shame, our home for bad politicians, Brexiteers hoist by their own petard. There's been a few of those lately, isn't there? Things that annoy me generally. The Foreign Office are in the Hall of Shame, and this time it's nothing to do with Dominic Raab. Here's what happened when somebody in a journalism forum that I'm part of asked the Foreign Office a question this week. The Foreign Office press officer said, "We're not commenting on that." And the journalist said, "Okay, I'll put that the Foreign Office is refusing to comment." And the Foreign Office said, "That would be completely inaccurate. We're not refusing to comment." And the journalist said, "So you are going to comment?" And the Foreign Office said, no comment, but you can't say we're refusing to comment." And there are people who think Yes Minister and the thick of it were fiction. Sainsbury's are in the Hall of Fame. I want to read you something from my colleague Tim Martin's Mandrake gossip column in this week's issue of the New European. Maybe you can go into your own Sainsbury's and try this. He says, Sainsbury's has long had associations with the Tories. Its life president, Lord Sainsbury, sits on the party's benches in the Lords. Politics has not often reared its head on the aisles until now. He says a journalist of Tim's acquaintance was visiting Sainsbury's in North London last week and inquired of an employee if the empty shelves he was seeing were down to COVID or Brexit. COVID, the man replied unhesitatingly. My friend explained, asked why he seemed so sure. The member of staff explained that it was what he'd been told to say to customers who asked the question. Tim contacted Sainsbury's press office to inquire if staff had been given a script in relation to this touchy subject, and their press officer, Sarah Head, answered, our colleagues and suppliers are working hard to make sure customers can find everything they need when they shop with us. Availability in some product categories may vary, but alternatives are available, and stores continue to receive deliveries daily. We've made our colleagues aware of this, and they are trained to help customers find a suitable alternative if a specific product is unavailable. Not really answering Tim's question. Tim asked again if there was a script that Sainsbury's staff were expected to keep to about COVID rather than Brexit, and the Sainsbury's PR office did not reply. Interesting. Now, Alak, Igad, Harum, Fitzanwidicum Corner, the magical time of the podcast, when I read out the most ridiculous bits from Anne Widdicombe's ridiculous column in the Ridiculous Daily Express. And so maybe Anne should get a job at Sainsbury's. Anne writes, apparently up to 40,000 HGV tests have been cancelled, largely due to COVID restrictions, which has been a major contributory factor to the shortage of delivery drivers and consequent empty shelves. Industrial action and poor wages haven't helped, but if the drivers cannot get on the road due to an absence of qualifying tests, the situation will not be resolved. So let's look at Anne's causes for the shortage of food. Again, 40,000 HGV tests cancelled, industrial action, poor wages. I can't help thinking there's another major contributory factor to the shortage of delivery drivers and consequent empty shelves that Anne isn't mentioning, but maybe it'll come to her in time. But foremost, or foreleast, in the Hall of Shame this week is the Mail on Sunday. And since Paul Dacre's old deputy, Ted Verity, took over as editor, the Mail on Sunday has been one of the more rabidly pro-Brexit papers, flouting all the evidence. Here are some of the headlines on the leader column, the Mail on Sunday says, from earlier this year. The lumbering EU monster has shown its true colours. A better vindication of Brexit cannot be found. From doom to gloom, proof that Brexit is boosting Britain. The EU's seething resentment at Britain's success hurts them more than it does us. And I could go on. There are numerous pro-Brexit pieces in the Mail on Sunday every week. So really interesting to see their leader column last Sunday, which accompanied a piece by the Marks and Spencer boss, Archie Norman, where he told Mail on Sunday readers about stuff they don't really read about in the Mail on Sunday, the horrendous nature of the red tape caused by Brexit. And the Mail on Sunday responded with a comment piece, a Mail on Sunday says piece, a leader column, that said, let's unite with the EU to crush the curse of border bureaucracy. What are they proposing? Some sort of union with Europe to have free trade and make it easier to have movement of people and goods? What an amazing idea. What could we call this union with Europe? Any ideas? But maybe we shouldn't laugh at the Mail on Sunday. Maybe they shouldn't be in the Hall of Shame at all. As I said earlier, what we need to end this crisis is for people who supported Brexit to stand up and say, look, some of what I thought was right was wrong, and here's how we're going to fix it. And weirdly, every day that we continue down the wrong path brings us closer to the point where we hold our hands up and we turn back down the right path. It's getting closer. Well, that was the New European podcast with Steve Anglesey. Thanks to my guest, Safras Manzoor. Thanks to you for listening. Thanks always to our producer, Ellie Longman-Rood. Episodes of the New European podcast are released every Friday. If you enjoyed this one, why not subscribe and rate and review it on your podcatcher of choice? If you'd like to enjoy more podcasts from the New European, check out Charlie Connolly's Great European Lives, available wherever you get your podcasts. Oh, and if you'd like to enjoy more from the New European, visit our new website and join us by subscribing at theneweuropean.co.uk/subscribe. On social media, you can join our Facebook readers group. You can follow the New European on Twitter at the New European. You can follow me on Twitter at Sanglesey, Sanglesey. And until the next time we meet, so long, snowflakes.
Dunkin' is putting a whole new spin on pumpkin at Dunkin' with our new Pumpkin Cream Cold Brew. Smooth, bold cold brew topped with velvety pumpkin cream cold foam made with cinnamon and nutmeg spices. And there's more pumpkin for you to love, like the delicious fall classic, our Pumpkin Spice Signature Latte. Rich espresso topped with whipped cream, caramel drizzle, and cinnamon sugar. That's how we pumpkin at Dunkin'. Sip into the fall season with the $3 medium Pumpkin Cream Cold Brew or Pumpkin Spice Signature Latte. America runs on Dunkin'. Participation may vary. Limited time offer. Exclusions apply. Valid on Pumpkin Spice Signature Latte only in all cold foam cold brew.